Elena Vasquez walked through the long crystal hallways of the Galactic Council building. Her boots made soft clicking sounds on the smooth floor. She had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now. 3 long, difficult years. The other aliens always looked at her strangely. Some had 6 arms, others had skin that glowed in the dark. There were beings made of gas who floated in special containers, and creatures that looked like giant insects. But they all had one thing in common. They thought humans were stupid and dangerous. Elena reached the main meeting room. It was huge, with a ceiling so high she could barely see it. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in their special chairs. Each species had their own section, with the right atmosphere, temperature, and gravity they needed. The human section was small, only 12 seats in the whole place. Elena sat down next to her team. Captain Rodriguez was there, representing Earth's military. Dr. Chen spoke for the scientists. There were a few others, but not many. Humans were new to this galactic community. The meeting started with the usual boring announcements, trade agreements between star systems, new colonies being approved. Elena had heard it all before. Then came the part she was dreading. Chancellor Kivith of the Altarian Empire stood up. He was tall and thin, with purple skin and 4 eyes. His voice was cold and mechanical when he spoke. "We must discuss the human problem," he said. "For 3 cycles we have watched this species, we have seen their violent nature, their wars, their destruction of their own planet's environment. They are not ready to be part of civilized space." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Elena felt her anger rising, but she kept her face calm. She had learned that showing emotion here was seen as another sign of human weakness. "The humans claim to want peace," continued another alien. This one was from the Zephyr Collective, a species that looked like floating jellyfish. "But look at their history. Thousands of years of constant warfare. They fight over resources, religion, territory. They cannot even unite their own planet under one government." More aliens nodded. Elena stood up slowly. The chamber fell quiet. When humans spoke, everyone listened, even if they didn't like what they heard. "We have made mistakes," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast room. "We have had wars. We have damaged our planet. But we have also learned from these mistakes. We have grown. We have changed." "Have you?" asked Chancellor Kivith. "Your species still maintains large military fleets. You still fight among yourselves. Just last cycle there were conflicts in your outer colonies." "Small disputes," Elena replied, "settled peacefully through negotiation. No lives were lost." "But you were ready for violence," said the Zephyrian delegate. "Your ships carried weapons. Your soldiers were prepared to fight. This is the human way, always ready for war." Elena looked around the room. She saw the same expression on every alien face. Fear mixed with disgust. They had made up their minds about humanity long ago. Dr. Chen leaned over and whispered to her, "Elena, maybe we should accept their restrictions. We can work within whatever limits they set." Elena shook her head slightly. She had tried to work within their system for 3 years. She had followed their rules, spoken their diplomatic language, tried to prove that humans could be civilized. Nothing had worked. Chancellor Kavith activated a large holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with different colored zones. The human territory was marked in red. "The Galactic Council has made a decision," he announced. "Effective, immediately. All human expansion beyond your current star systems is forbidden. Your species will remain in quarantine until you prove you have evolved beyond your savage nature." The red zone on the map was suddenly surrounded by a yellow barrier. Elena stared at it. Humanity's future, boxed in by fear and prejudice. "Furthermore," Kivith continued, "human military vessels are banned from all neutral space. Your trade will be limited to approved routes only. Cultural exchanges with other species are suspended indefinitely." Elena felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, her hope. For 3 years, she had believed they could make this work. She had thought that eventually, the other species would see humans as equals, but they never would. She stood up again, and this time her voice was different, colder, more certain. The Terran Federation rejects this decision, she said. We reject your authority over our people and our future. The chamber erupted in surprised chittering and buzzing. No species had ever defied a council decision before. You cannot simply reject our ruling, said Kavith, his four eyes all focusing on Elena. The council represents the combined wisdom of civilizations millions of years older than yours. Maybe that's the problem, Elena replied. Maybe being old doesn't make you wise. Maybe it just makes you afraid of anything different. She gestured to her team. They all stood up together. The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately, Elena announced. We will no longer seek your approval for our actions or our growth. We will find our own path among the stars. You are making a grave mistake, warned the Zephyrian delegate. Without the Council's protection, you will face dangers you cannot imagine. There are threats in the dark spaces between stars, ancient enemies that only our combined strength keeps at bay. Elena smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant smile. We've been fighting threats since we first picked up sticks and stones, she said. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed most species. We'll survive whatever is out there too. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her team followed her. As they reached the doors, Elena looked back one last time. You have made a grave miscalculation about human nature, she said. We are not just warriors. We are survivors, explorers, and builders. You could have been our friends and allies. Instead, you chose to be strangers. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the chamber, the aliens sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then Chancellor Kavith began to laugh. It was a harsh, metallic sound. Let them go, he said. They are children playing at being adults. Without our guidance and protection, they will quickly learn their place in the universe. Perhaps when they come crawling back, begging for readmission, we will consider it. Many of the other delegates joined in his laughter. The humans were gone, and good riddance. The galaxy would be a more peaceful, orderly place without their chaotic influence. But in the back of the chamber, a few older delegates did not laugh. They remembered stories from their own species' ancient past. Stories about young, dangerous races that had been cast out or contained. Most of those stories did not end well for the ones who did the casting out. As Elena and her team boarded their ship, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For 3 years, she had tried to make humanity fit into someone else's idea of civilization. Now they were free to become whatever they chose to be. What do we do now? Asked Captain Rodriguez. Elena looked out at the stars through the ship's window. Somewhere out there was Earth. And beyond that, infinite possibilities. Now we show them what humanity can really do when we stop asking for permission, she said. The ship turned away from the Galactic Council station and jumped into hyperspace, carrying the last humans to leave the galactic community. They would not return for a very long time. 6 months passed after the humans left the Galactic Council. At first, most aliens were happy about it. The meetings were quieter now. There were no more arguments about human military ships or their strange ideas about freedom and individual rights. But slowly things started to change. The first sign came from the Nexari Trade Consortium. They controlled most of the shipping routes between star systems. Nexari were good at business. They looked like large beetles with excellent mathematical minds. They could calculate profit and loss better than any other species. Consortium Leader. Jex called an emergency meeting with the Council's Economic Committee. His normally calm voice was filled with worry. We have a problem, he announced, his mandibles clicking nervously. Our shipping revenues have dropped by 30% in the last 3 months. Chancellor Kivith leaned forward in his chair. How is this possible? With the humans gone, there should be more opportunities for trade. That's what we thought too, Jex replied. He activated a holographic star map. But look at these routes. Red lines appeared on the map, showing the major trade paths between systems. 17 of our most profitable shipping lanes have become unusable. Unusable how? Asked Dr. Yathara. the Council's chief scientist. She was from a species called the Enlightened, tall, blue-skinned beings who prided themselves on logic and reason. "We don't know," Zex admitted. "Our ships enter these areas and immediately get lost. Navigation systems fail. Some crews report seeing things that shouldn't exist. Others experience time distortions. 3 ships have disappeared completely." The committee members looked at each other with confusion. The galaxy's shipping routes had been stable for thousands of years. How could they suddenly become dangerous? "What do these routes have in common?" asked Dr. Ythara. Jex hesitated before answering. They were all originally mapped and maintained by human survey teams. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. The humans had been active in space exploration, it was true, but their technology was primitive compared to most Council species. How could their absence affect navigation routes? "I need to study this further," Dr. Ythara said. "Send me all the data you have." While the trade consortium struggled with their shipping problems, other issues began to appear. The Outer Rim territories, which had been peaceful for decades, started reporting pirate attacks. These weren't the usual small-time raiders who stole cargo and ran away. These were organized fleets with advanced weapons. Captain Vorth of the Council Defense Force was called to investigate. He belonged to the Harmony Collective, a peaceful species that looked like walking trees. The collective believed in solving problems through discussion and understanding, not violence. His report to the Council was disturbing. "The attacks are systematic," he explained. "The pirates seem to know exactly which ships to target and when. They have detailed information about our patrol schedules and defensive capabilities." "How is this possible?" demanded Chancellor Kivith. "Our security protocols haven't changed." "That's just it," Captain Vorth replied. "Our protocols haven't changed in 200 years, but until recently, there were always human patrol ships in these sectors. Their presence seemed to discourage criminal activity." "The humans were not officially part of our defense grid," protested a delegate from the Crystal Alliance. "They patrolled those areas on their own initiative." "Yes," agreed Captain Vorth. "But they were effective. The pirates feared human crews more than they feared us." Dr. Ythara had been studying the shipping problems for weeks. Her findings were troubling. She called a special session to present her research. "The humans weren't just using our navigation systems," she explained to the gathered delegates. "They were improving them. Their ships carried sensors we didn't even know existed. They could detect quantum fluctuations, dimensional rifts, and gravitational anomalies that our instruments completely miss." She showed them recordings from human ships. The displays were full of data that made no sense to the other species. "Human brains process information differently than ours," she continued. "Where we see empty space, they saw currents of energy. Where we saw stable routes, they saw dangerous areas that needed constant monitoring and adjustment." "Are you saying we need primitive human technology to navigate our own galaxy?" asked Kivith, his voice full of disbelief. "I'm saying their technology wasn't primitive," Dr. Ythara replied quietly. "It was different. They used intuition and creativity in ways we never considered. Their chaotic thinking patterns allowed them to perceive things our more orderly minds filtered out as irrelevant." The room fell silent. The idea that humans might have been superior in any way was difficult for most Council species to accept. The problems continued to grow. Communications networks that had relied on human relay stations started failing. Scientific research projects that had included human data suddenly made no progress. Even the weather prediction systems for inhabited planets became less accurate. It was as if humanity had been the glue holding many systems together, and no one had noticed until they were gone. The worst news came from the deep space monitoring stations. They detected something moving in the dark areas between galaxies, something that shouldn't exist. Dr. Ythara's team analyzed the readings for days. What they found made her molt with fear. The Enlightened only lost their skin when they were terrified. "It's the void touched," she whispered to her assistant. The readings matched descriptions from the ancient archives. The void touched were an enemy from legend. Millions of years ago, they had tried to destroy all life in the galaxy. The combined forces of dozens of species had barely managed to defeat Them. And even then they had only been driven away, not destroyed. According to the old records, the void touched fed on life energy and positive emotions. They turned thriving worlds into dead, empty spaces. They could move through dimensions that normal matter couldn't access. Dr. Yathara brought her findings to Chancellor Kavith privately. She didn't want to cause panic among the population. The deep space sensors show movement in 17 different sectors, she reported. The energy signatures match historical data about void-touched scout ships. Kavith's purple skin turned pale. That's impossible. They were defeated eons ago. The barriers between dimensions should keep them out. The barriers were maintained by a combination of technologies from many species, Dr. Yathara said. But according to these old records, humans contributed something unique to those barriers. Something about their ability to perceive multiple realities simultaneously. You're suggesting that human presence was necessary to keep the void touched away? I'm suggesting we don't fully understand what human presence was actually doing for galactic stability. More months passed and the situation grew worse. Trade continued to decline as more shipping routes became dangerous. Pirate attacks increased in frequency and boldness. Some outer colonies stopped responding to communications entirely. The Council tried to solve these problems the way they always had, through careful study, logical analysis, and committee meetings. But their solutions didn't work. The universe seemed to be following rules they didn't understand. Finally, Chancellor Kavith made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. He authorized a message to be sent toward human space. To the representatives of the former Terran Federation, the message began. The Galactic Council requests immediate dialogue regarding your possible return to our organization. We are prepared to discuss significant modifications to our previous decisions. The message was sent on all frequencies, using every communication method known to Council science. It would take weeks to reach the edge of human territory, and weeks more for any response to return. The Council waited. Days passed, then weeks. Many delegates began to think the humans were ignoring them completely. Then, after a month of silence, a response arrived. It was not what anyone expected. The message came through every communication system simultaneously. It appeared on public screens, private terminals, and emergency broadcasts. It was transmitted in every language at once, somehow managing to be perfectly understood by every species that heard it. We are no longer interested in your council, the message said. We have found our own path. That was all. No negotiation, no demands, no anger or resentment. Just a simple statement that chilled every delegate who heard it. The humans were no longer the desperate primitive species that had begged for acceptance 3 years ago. They had become something else. Something that no longer needed or wanted what the Galactic Council offered. For the first time in millions of years, the Council faced a problem they couldn't solve with logic and committee meetings. They had lost something they didn't know they needed, and now it was too late to get it back. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. The problems that started small had grown into a crisis that threatened the entire galaxy. Dr. Yathara stood in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from across known space. The blue-skinned scientist had aged visibly in the past months. Her usually perfect posture was bent with worry, and her large eyes showed the strain of too many sleepless nights. The pattern is clear, she said to her research team. Every system that depended on human input is failing. Navigation, defense, communications, even basic trade routes. It's like removing a keystone from an arch. Everything else starts to collapse. Her assistant, a young Nexari named Click 7, looked up from his calculations. Dr. Yathara, I've been studying the old records. Before humans joined the council, did we have these same problems? That's the strange part, she replied. According to historical data, we didn't. But we also didn't have the same level of galactic integration. Humans didn't just participate in our civilization. They helped create the version of it we've been living in for the past 50 years. The laboratory's emergency alarm began to sound. Dr. Yathara quickly activated the main communication system. All senior staff to emergency stations, came the announcement. Priority 1 alert from the Outer Rim defense grid. Dr. Yathara and Her team rushed to the main control center. Chancellor Kavith was already there, along with representatives from every major council species. The large wall display showed a map of the galaxy with flashing red indicators along the outer edge. Captain Vorth of the Defense Force was giving his report, his tree-like form swaying with agitation. 17 monitoring stations have gone dark in the past 6 hours, he said. The last transmissions all reported the same thing. Unknown vessels approaching from outside the galaxy. Ship types? Asked Kavith. That's the problem. Our sensors can't identify them. The ships seem to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. They're using technology we don't recognize. Dr. Yithara felt her skin begin to tighten, the first sign of fear molting among her species. Captain, can you show us the energy readings from these unknown ships? The display changed to show wavelength analysis and power signatures. Dr. Yithara's worst fears were confirmed. It's them, she whispered. The void touched have returned. A shocked silence filled the control room. Every species in the galaxy knew the legends of the void touched, but most thought they were just stories used to frighten children. That's impossible, said consortium leader Jex, his mandibles clicking nervously. The void touched were defeated millions of years ago. The dimensional barriers. The barriers are failing, Dr. Yithara interrupted. I've been monitoring them for months. They've been weakening steadily since the humans left. Chancellor Kavith's 4 eyes all focused on her. What do you mean? What do humans have to do with dimensional barriers that are millions of years old? Dr. Yithara activated her own display, showing complex mathematical models and historical data. I've been studying this for 2 years, she said. The original barriers were built by combining technologies from every species in the ancient alliance, but they required constant maintenance and adjustment. Most species contributed computing power or energy, but humans contributed something else. What? Demanded Kavith. Consciousness, she replied. Human minds work differently than ours. They can perceive and interact with multiple realities simultaneously. Without them realizing it, every human in space was helping to maintain the barriers simply by existing and observing. The room erupted in shocked chittering and buzzing from the various species. You're saying that human presence was necessary to keep the void touched locked away? Asked a delegate from the Crystal Alliance. I'm saying that human minds created a kind of observer effect that reinforced the barriers. When they left, that reinforcement disappeared. The barriers have been degrading ever since. Captain Vorth spoke up again. Dr. Yithara, how long do we have before the barriers fail completely? She checked her calculations one more time, hoping she had made an error. She hadn't. Based on current decay rates, 6 months, maybe less. The control room fell silent except for the soft humming of electronics. 6 months before an enemy returned that had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy, millions of years. Ego, we need to contact the humans immediately, said Kavith. Whatever our differences, this threatens everyone. We tried that already, reminded Jex. They said they weren't interested in our council anymore. Then we'll offer them whatever they want, Kavith replied. Full membership, equal representation, removal of all restrictions. Anything. Dr. Yithara shook her head sadly. I don't think you understand. The humans we knew 3 years ago might have accepted such an offer, but they've been gone for 2 years. They've had time to grow and change without our influence. We don't know what they've become. Over the next few weeks, the council tried everything they could think of. They sent diplomatic messages, trade, offers, even formal apologies for their past treatment of humanity. They broadcast on every known frequency, using every communication method in their extensive databases. The humans did not respond. Meanwhile, the situation continued to deteriorate. The void-touch scout ships were no longer hiding. They moved openly through the outer rim, testing defenses and gathering information. Wherever they passed, space itself seemed to become darker, as if they were draining the energy from the vacuum itself. Council defense fleets were dispatched to intercept them, but the encounters went badly. The void-touched ships could phase in and out of normal space at will. Council weapons passed right through them. while their return fire drained energy from ship systems and crew members alike. Captain Vorth returned from one such encounter with only half his fleet. His report was grim. "They're not just ships," he said, his bark-like skin showing stress patterns. "They're alive somehow. They fed on the life force of my crew members. The ones who survived are changed, empty, like something essential has been drained from them." Dr. Yathara had been studying the void touched constantly since their return. What she discovered made her fear for the future of all life in the galaxy. "According to the ancient records, the void touched don't just kill," she reported to an emergency council session. "They transform living matter into something like themselves. They're not trying to conquer our galaxy. They're trying to convert it into an extension of their own reality."
"How do we fight something like that?" asked Kavith. "The ancients did it by combining the unique abilities of hundreds of different species. But even then, it was barely enough. And we've lost access to some of those abilities. Human abilities,"
Kavith said quietly. "Among others, but yes, human consciousness was apparently crucial to the original victory. They could perceive the void touched even when they were phase shifted. They could predict their movements using intuition rather than logic. They could maintain hope and determination even when facing extinction." Chancellor Kavith made a decision that went against every principle of council diplomacy. He prepared a message that would be broadcast across the entire galaxy, not just to human space. "People of the galaxy," his message began, "we face extinction at the hands of an ancient enemy. The Galactic Council has failed you. We cast out those who could have helped us because we feared their differences. Now we face the consequences of our arrogance." The message continued with a full confession of the Council's mistakes and a desperate plea for help from anyone who would listen. "To the humans who were our partners and became our outcasts," Kavith said, his voice breaking with emotion. "We were wrong. We were fools. We threw away something precious because we couldn't see its value. If you can hear this, if you still care about the worlds you once called friends, please help us, not because we deserve it, but because billions of innocent lives hang in the balance." The message was sent on every frequency, repeated in every language, broadcast from every station and ship in Council space. It was a complete surrender of Council pride and authority. The response came 3 days later. It arrived not as a transmission, but as a physical object. A small crystalline cube that appeared simultaneously on the desks of every council leader across the galaxy. When activated, the cube projected a simple message in letters of pure light. "We are coming." That was all. 2 words that somehow carried more authority and power than all the council's diplomatic protocols combined. Dr. Yathara held the cube in her hands and felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Whatever the humans had become in their 2 years of exile, they were still capable of compassion. The question was, would they still be recognizable as the species the Council had once known? The first sign that humanity had changed came from the edge of known space. A Zephyrian scout ship called the Gentle Current was on patrol near the outer rim when its sensors detected something impossible. Captain Zilth floated in his command tank, his jellyfish-like body pulsing with confusion as he stared at the readings. "Navigation officer," he called out in his species' musical language. "Are you certain these readings are correct?" The navigation officer, another Zephyrian named Vresh, checked his instruments 3 times before responding. "Captain, I've never seen anything like this. There's a star system where none should exist, and it's moving." "Moving how?" "The entire system is traveling through space at impossible speeds. Not just the planets. The star itself is moving as if something is carrying it." Captain Zilth ordered his ship to investigate at a safe distance. What they found defied everything the Galactic Council knew about stellar engineering and physics. Young Yellow Star was indeed moving through space, surrounded by its planets in perfect orbital harmony. But as they watched, they realized the planets were not natural worlds. They were constructed, massive spheres of crystallized matter that seemed to bend light around them. "Captain," whispered the sensor officer, "I'm detecting life signs. Millions of them. But the energy patterns, they're unlike anything in our databases." As they watched, something even more incredible happened. One of the planets began to change shape, flowing like liquid while maintaining its size and mass. Within minutes, it had transformed from a sphere into a complex geometric form that hurt to look at directly. "Are we recording this?" asked Captain Zilth. "Yes, sir. But I don't think anyone will believe it." Their sensors detected movement from the moving star system. A ship was approaching them. But calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a gentle breeze. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface seemed to be made of crystallized space itself, shifting between solid matter and pure energy. "Captain, they're hailing us," reported the communications officer. On screen. The view screen activated, and Captain Zilth found himself looking at something that might once have been human. The figure was tall and graceful, but their skin seemed to contain tiny stars that twinkled in patterns. Their eyes were deep black, not with pupils but as if they were looking into the depths of space itself. "Greetings, children of the Zephyr Collective," the being said. And somehow Captain Zilth understood every word despite never learning human language. "We are the descendants of those you once knew as humanity. Do not be afraid." "We were not afraid." Captain Zilth lied. "We're just surprised. We received word that humans were returning to help with the void-touched crisis." The being nodded slowly. "Yes, we are aware of the situation. We have been preparing." "Preparing how?" "By becoming something capable of standing against the dark between realities," the being replied. "When we left your council, we continued to explore. We found others, species that had been rejected or forgotten by galactic civilization. Together, we learned that the universe is far larger and stranger than your council ever imagined." Captain Zilth tried to process this information. "Others? What others?" The being gestured, and the view screen showed images that made Captain Zilth's consciousness real. There were creatures of living flame dancing in the hearts of stars, beings of pure thought that existed in the spaces between atoms, entities that looked like dragons made of folded spacetime. "The universe is full of life that your science cannot detect," the being explained. "Your council spent millions of years cataloging and categorizing known forms of existence, but you missed entire categories of reality. We found them, and they taught us to grow beyond the limitations of flesh and ordinary matter." "What have you become?" whispered Captain Zilth. The being smiled, and their face was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "We have become what we always had the potential to be. Humans were never limited by their biology. That was just the starting point. We are explorers, Captain. We explore not just space, but possibility itself." The communication ended, and the massive ship moved away toward the galaxy's core. Captain Zilth immediately sent an emergency report to the council. Dr. Yathara received the report at the same time as dozens of similar messages from scouts across the outer rim. Humanity was returning, but they were not returning alone. And they were definitely not the same species that had left 3 years ago. She compiled all the reports and presented them to an emergency council session. "Based on these encounters," she told the assembled delegates, "humanity has undergone some kind of transformation. They appear to have merged their consciousness with their technology. They can reshape matter at the molecular level. They exist, partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we cannot access." Chancellor Kavith studied the recordings from various scout ships. "Are they still human?" "That's difficult to determine," Dr. Yathara replied. "They claim to be descendants of humanity. They show concern for our welfare, but they've clearly evolved far beyond their original biological form." "Have they become like the void touched?" asked a delegate from the Crystal Alliance. "No," Dr. Yathara said firmly. "The energy signatures are completely different. The void touched drain life and convert it to entropy. These transformed humans seem to enhance and protect life. Wherever their ships have passed, our sensors detect increased energy levels and improved stability in local space." More reports continued to arrive. Human ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, but not the ships that Council species remembered. These vessels were works of art as much as transportation, flowing forms that seemed to be grown rather than built, made of materials that shifted between solid matter and pure energy. The humans themselves were equally changed. Some still appeared, mostly biological, but enhanced in ways that allowed them to survive in the vacuum of space without protection. Others had become beings of living energy who could take physical form when needed. A few had merged so completely with their ships that the distinction between pilot and vessel no longer existed. But the most disturbing reports came from the humans' interactions with the void-touched scouts still probing the outer rim. Captain, Vorth returned from the border regions with news that changed everything. I witnessed a battle between a small human vessel and 3 void-touched destroyers, he reported to the Council. The human ship was tiny compared to the enemy vessels. But when the fight began, he paused, his tree-like form shuddering with the memory. The human ship didn't just defeat the void-touched, he continued. It absorbed them, converted their dark energy into something else. When the battle ended, there were 4 ships, the original human vessel, and 3 new ships that looked like the void-touched destroyers but filled with light instead of darkness. Dr. Yathora leaned forward. They converted void-touch technology? More than that, Captain Vorth replied. They converted the void-touched themselves. I detected life signs in those transformed ships. The enemy creatures were still alive, but us changed, redeemed somehow. This news sent shockwaves through the Council. The void-touched were supposed to be beyond redemption, beings of pure entropy and destruction. If humans could transform even them into something positive. What kind of power does this require? Whispered Chancellor Kavith. Dr. Yathara had been working on this question for days. Her answer was unsettling. According to my calculations, it would require the ability to manipulate fundamental forces at the quantum level. Not just matter and energy, but information itself. The basic patterns that define reality. She showed them complex equations that few Council species could even comprehend. The humans appear to have developed technology that can rewrite the basic code of existence, she explained. They're not just advanced, they've become something like living gods. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not just survived their exile from galactic civilization, they had transcended it entirely. The question now, said Kivith quietly, is whether these transformed humans still care about the fate of species they left behind. We cast them out when they were weak and needed our acceptance. Now that they're powerful beyond our comprehension, why should they help us? His question was answered the next day, when every inhabited world in the galaxy received the same message, simultaneously. It appeared in the sky above every city, written in letters of pure light that could be read by any species. Children of the stars, do not fear. The darkness that approaches has faced us before and failed. We have grown strong, in the spaces between galaxies. We return not as the humans you remember, but as the guardians your universe needs. Prepare yourselves. The final battle approaches. Dr. Yathara stood on the observation deck of the Council station, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among them, beings who had once been human were preparing for a war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. She wondered if they would even recognize their old galaxy when this was over. The void-touched invasion began on a Tuesday, by Council Standard Time. It started not with ships or weapons, but with the stars themselves beginning to dim. Dr. Yathara was in her laboratory when the emergency alarm sounded throughout the station. She rushed to the main observation deck where Chancellor Kavith and other Council leaders were staring at displays showing the galaxy's outer rim. It's happening, Kavith said, his voice hollow with fear. The void-touched are no longer hiding. The display showed dozens of star systems along the galactic edge. One by one, their light was fading. Not the natural dimming of dying stars, but something worse. The stars were being drained of their energy, converted into the cold darkness that the void-touched used as fuel. How fast is it spreading? Dr. Yathara asked. 17 systems have gone dark in the past 6 hours, reported Captain Vorth. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within weeks. As they watched, emergency transmissions came in from the affected systems. The messages were all similar and all terrifying. Entire planets were being converted into twisted versions of themselves. The living became hollow, empty creatures that served the void touched. The dead rose again as shadows that spread the darkness further. "Our defense fleets?" asked Kavith. "Gone," Captain Vorth replied simply. "The void touched don't just destroy our ships, they convert them. Every vessel we send against them becomes another weapon in their fleet." Dr. Yathara checked her calculations one final time. The dimensional barriers that had held back the void touched for millions of years had completely collapsed. There was nothing left to contain them. "Where are the humans?" demanded a delegate from the Crystal Alliance. They said they would help. As if summoned by those words, every screen in the control room activated simultaneously. The image that appeared showed a being that had once been human, but was now something far more magnificent. Elena Vasquez, or what she had become, stood in what appeared to be the command center of a vast ship. She was beautiful in a way that transcended physical appearance. Her form seemed to be made of living starlight, constantly shifting between energy and matter. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that touched something deep in the consciousness of every listener. "People of the galaxy," she said, "the time has come to stand together against the darkness. But know this, the battle ahead will not be won by weapons or technology alone. It will be won by choice." "What do you mean?" asked Chancellor Kavith. Elena's attention focused on him, and he felt as if she could see not just his physical form but his soul itself. "The void touched feed on despair, fear, and entropy," she explained. "They grow stronger when beings give up hope, but they become weaker when faced with determination, creativity, and the refusal to surrender. This battle will be fought as much in the realm of consciousness as in physical space." She gestured, and the display showed images from throughout the galaxy. Human ships were appearing everywhere, not the small fleet that had left 3 years ago, but thousands of vessels of impossible beauty and power. "We have not returned alone," Elena continued. "We bring allies you have never imagined, beings from the spaces between stars, entities that exist in pure mathematics, creatures born from the dreams of dying gods. The universe is vast and strange, and most of it has been waiting for someone brave enough to find them." The display changed to show these allies. Dr. Yathara gasped as she saw creatures that challenged every assumption about life and consciousness. There were beings made of crystallized music that sang reality into new shapes, entities that looked like living galaxies, with civilizations existing on each of their spiral arms, dragons made of folded space-time who could fly between dimensions. "How is this possible?" whispered Kavith. "Because we stopped limiting ourselves to what was known and started exploring what was possible," Elena replied. "When you cast us out, you freed us from the need to fit into your definitions of civilization. We became explorers of infinity itself." The war began in earnest the next day. The void touched, no longer content with slow conversion, launched their main assault. Their fleets emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, ships that looked like holes cut into reality itself, crewed by beings that had once been alive but were now animated by pure entropy. The first battle took place at the edge of the Altarian Empire's territory. The void-touched fleet numbered in the thousands, each ship capable of draining the life from entire planets. They were met by a single human vessel. The ship was unlike anything in Council records. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its surface covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it opened fire, it didn't use conventional weapons. Instead, it projected beams of pure possibility. Where these beams struck void-touched ships, they transformed. The dark vessels became bright, their entropy reversed, their crews restored from shadow back to living consciousness. The battle lasted only minutes. When it was over, the entire void-touched fleet had been converted. Thousands of ships that had come to spread darkness were now filled with light. Their crews no longer servants of destruction but guardians of life. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared wherever the void touched attacked, but they didn't fight in the traditional sense. Instead, they healed. They took the weapons of entropy and transformed them into tools of creation. On the second day, Dr. Yathara received a message asking her to come aboard one of the human vessels. She found herself transported not by conventional means, but by simply thinking about being there. The ship's interior defied description. Corridors that led in impossible directions, rooms that were larger inside than outside, gardens where the plants were made of living mathematics. And everywhere, beings that had once been human but were now something wondrous. Elena Vasquez met her in what might have been a garden, or might have been a map of the galaxy itself. It was difficult to tell. "You want to understand what we've become," Elena said, somehow knowing Dr. Yathara's thoughts. "Yes," the scientist admitted. "How did you change so much in just 3 years?" Elena smiled, and her expression contained infinite kindness. "We didn't change. We simply became more ourselves. Humans were always explorers, dreamers, builders of impossible things. Your council wanted us to be something smaller, safer. When we refused, you set us free to discover our true nature." She gestured to the walls around them, which showed images of human colonies throughout the galaxy. "We found others who had been rejected by conventional civilization," Elena explained. "Species that were too strange, too dangerous, too different for your council. Together we learned that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in the universe. Reality is not fixed. It's a collaborative creation by all thinking beings." And the void touched? They represent the ultimate expression of despair. Beings who gave up on the possibility of growth and chose entropy instead. But even they can be redeemed if someone is willing to show them hope. On the third day, the final battle began. The void touched, realizing that their individual fleets were being converted, gathered their entire force for one massive assault on the galactic core. The armada was vast, beyond comprehension. Ships that blotted out the stars, creatures of living darkness that fed on hope itself, weapons that could unweave the fabric of space-time. They were met by humanity and their allies in a battle that raged across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was a conflict fought not just with energy and matter, but with ideas themselves. The void touched projected despair, futility, the certainty that all existence was meaningless. The humans responded with creativity, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept limitations. They turned the void-touched's own weapons against them, converting entropy into potential energy, transforming despair into hope. The battle reached its climax when the void-touched deployed their ultimate weapon, a device that would collapse the barriers between dimensions entirely, allowing entropy to consume not just this galaxy but all possible realities. Elena Vasquez faced this weapon alone. She stood in the void between stars. Her consciousness expanded to encompass the entire galaxy, and made a choice that defined the future of all existence. Instead of fighting the weapon, she embraced it. She allowed the entropy to flow through her, but as it did, she transformed it. Her consciousness, enhanced by years of exploring impossible realities, turned the weapon's destructive power into creative force. The explosion of possibility that resulted could be seen from neighboring galaxies. When the light faded, the void touched were gone, not destroyed but transformed into their original selves, the species they had been before despair consumed them. The war was over. The galaxy was safe, but it was also forever changed. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council tried to return to normal. They called sessions, made proposals, attempted to re-establish the order they had always known, but the humans were no longer interested in their council. When Chancellor Kavith sent a formal invitation for humanity to rejoin galactic civilization, the response came not as a message, but as a gift. Every inhabited world in the galaxy received a small crystal that, when activated, showed images of the universe beyond their galaxy. Vast networks of civilizations they had never imagined. Beings of pure thought, creatures of living art,